Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war frontline update, a sort of 2.5 to 3 day frontline update for the 5th into the 6th. By the time I finish this, it will be the 6th of March 2025, so Thursday. And just to let you know, on my map at the moment, I synthesized two mappers, don't I? So it's Andrew Perpetua, essentially with the blue line, and Suryat maps with the orange line. Now, Andrew Perpetua hasn't updated his map at the point of recording this for 20 hours. So there are a number of gains, as you can see from these blue pins, particularly down in this area, that he has not registered at the moment. Just bear in mind that he hasn't just, it's a time when he's probably updating it right now, but there isn't that update at the moment. So it will look like only Suryat Maps is recording those positive outcomes for the Ukrainians. We're going to go to Kupyansk area first, and as you can see, the Ukrainians really are under a lot of pressure, particularly on this western side. And what we are hearing, the Russians are basically using all of their guided glide bombs in this area. So they've pulled back from using guided glide bombs along the rest of the front, which might have something to do with the Ukrainians doing fairly well, but it's probably got a lot to do with electronic warfare, jamming those bombs and whatnot, and they are having more success in using them up in this Kursk area, and that might have something to do with the Russians making these gains. But I think also the Russians really want that area back, so they're piling it in. There are some people saying really the Ukrainians should be pulling out there. It's going to be interesting to see how this proceeds over the next few days and weeks, but certainly that western side, the Russians making some fairly substantial gains. So in 2.5, 3 days, that's pretty good, all things considered, considering this was a pretty well defended area of the front, and making some gains up in the northern area. Quite a big difference between the two mappers, though, it has to be said, in most places on the front line here, but also a few gains right over to the and actually that's across the border, is it not, over in the west here. So the Russians coming down now south of the Ukrainian border, as according to Suryat maps. So that's a little bit of a worry. And then over here as well, some tiny gains there. But it's that western area that needs to be looked at. Then when we come across to Kharkiv, no change to these two areas. Interesting, there are some changes here, and they might not be the full extent of the changes. So we saw the other day that the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back around Petropavlivka on the way to Sinkivka. No change to Suryat maps in some of the gains that are claimed to be around that area. But we do see that Suryat maps has made some pretty substantial gains around Zapadny, or between Zapadny and Vorochna there. So interesting, and in fact we do hear some details about this. Rob Lee saying updated mapping showing advances near Kupyansk and Uspenivka. That's down in Prokrosk area. We'll go to Kupyansk first. So that's that area we're talking about by Zapadny, the Vorochna up there. Quite a big difference to Suryat Maps' mapping here. I think Suryat Maps is maybe a little bit more charitable to the Russians there. And Grayskull also talking about this area too. Pro-Ukrainian channel reporting that the Ukrainians have advanced north of Zapadna, and you can see that there are these two sectors there, two salients, two bridgeheads coming out there. Bridgehead's probably the better word there, and you can see that on Rob Lee's mapping. But when we go to Suryat maps, that isn't the case at all. It's a much larger area of land, so I think we'd just be warned that Suryat maps is probably being a little bit more charitable to what's going on there. And then here around Sinkivka, that certain further claims that the Ukrainians have reportedly advanced and have liberated the south of Sinkivka. That's a fairly substantial set of gains around there. So right south of Sinkivka, if we come over to there, that would suggest all around this area. So there's the Sinkivka settlement. You've got Suryat maps having Russians in control of all of this. It looks like Grayskull would have the Ukrainians taking back land between here and there. So it's this kind of area there, as well as them having taken land on the way to Sinkivka from this direction. In fact, there were some claims the other day that, broadly speaking, that area, as I mentioned, was the Russians were not controlling that either. So interesting that there's some pushback here. And in fact, what we're seeing in a number of places, so not much movement around Pischany area there. Tersky and Torna, some movement, but it's not a great deal at all. So talking about this kind of culmination, it's not to say that the Russians, that's then done, full stop. They'll be regenerating to try and, recruit some more, train some more troops and get to go again. But how long that will take, I don't know. And in this lull where the Russians seem to have exhausted themselves, the Ukrainians are pushing in a number of places. And that's obviously good news for Ukrainians, no doubt. And it's a lot of people are saying it's particularly frustrating where you get people like JD Vance and all these other people politically saying that, Ukraine are kind of done for and we need to put pressure on them, etc., etc. And actually the Ukrainians go, no, we're doing all right. This is, I was listening to radio tonight on LBC and I had a whole panel of people. And, one of them was saying exactly this, that it's really frustrating because you look at, you speak to people like me or you speak to people on the front line or people that analyze this closely, and the Ukrainians are doing better now than they have done for a couple of months along many of these places in the front line. Toretsk, there's some substantial counterattacks. Prokrosk, they're starting to push back. In fact, there are claims tonight from Russians that the Ukrainians are doing a counteroffensive in Prokrosk. I think that's probably a little over-egged, but you get the point that this is doubly frustrating, that it's all doom and gloom and the larger sort of overarching geopolitical realm. But actually, on the battlefront, it's not too bad. The Russians are not making the gains they were even like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now you come down to Bakhmut, no changes around Chasiv Yar. That's good news. Excellent, really. And then Toretsk here, some more gains as according to Suryat maps, where the Russians have been pushed back both in the north and the south of Toretsk. If we come on to Toretsk, actually, before we get down to Prokrosk, I've got this in slightly the wrong order. Now, here we go. So I think that's, Shevchenko. Right, here, Toretsk, making some further gains to Ukrainians on the southern flank of Toretsk. So just by these tailings heaps here, which I presume are these ones over there. Yep. So let's see if there's any substantial difference between these maps. So we have a grey zone covering both of those heaps, and then that area directly south of that larger one under Ukrainian control, pushing the Russians back. So that is to say that all of this land there is at least grey zone, and that would be a marked difference from what Surat Maps has. Actually, marked difference from what both the mappers have. So interesting there, and some activity going on to the north as well. I don't know that we've got any other talk. Yeah, okay, so now there's some video coming out, clean up of private sector near Toretsk by the forces of the 12th Azov Brigade. During the operation, almost 50 occupiers were eliminated. A little less than a platoon was taken prisoner. Also, several dozen civilians were evacuated along with their pets. Wow, people still living in Toretsk. Incredible. But yeah, that's really good news to hear that the Ukrainians are clearing out villages now and doing a good job there. Okay, so now I'm actually going to move all of that over to there. So that's Toretsk. We'll move on further to the south, and actually you can see that there's some potential counterattacks by the Ukrainians, unless it's a rejigging around Tarasivka there to the north of that whole Prokrosk sector. So again, that's good news. But most of the news is coming out in this area. So we've got Udachny and Uspenivka here. We had seen counterattacks by the Ukrainians around Pischany and Kotlina, retaking Kotlina, pushing the Russians across that railway line that comes along there. And now we're seeing activity around Udachny and Uspenivka. So you're wondering whether they have intentions really to take back this whole area there. Let's have a look at what some of the sources are saying. Before we look at the in finer detail at some of these villages. There are these claims just coming out tonight. So Dead District here saying something big happening in Prokrosk direction. According to Russian sources, General Drapatyi has begun a large-scale assault on the Russian flank. Also, Ukrainian sources are confirmed. They have confirmed this. Interesting stuff. So that's not in English. This is around Prokrosk, so that's that Kotlina area, and then Shevchenko, and then also Uspanivka there. And we're hearing about Udachny up there. So a number of places where they are pushing. Shevchenko, we're gonna look at that in a minute. Pischany sort of area. Kotlina, Udachny, Uspanivka. So right around there, and the claims are that there is a fairly significant counter offensive. I call it a counter attack, really, although it's in a few places. It's been reported that in the Prokrosk sector, Ukrainian troops have broken through the northern part of Shevchenko village and are trying to establish a foothold. There is reportedly intense fighting taking place. So that is Shevchenko there. The Ukrainians in the northern part of the village. Sizable enough village, that one. It's not one of these kind of 10 houses. It's fairly sizable, and that is seeing the Ukrainians in the north of the village there. Okay, then so actually, if you look at this map, it's pushing the Russians, the grey zone, right back there. So if we come to here, the grey zone would be all of this area north of that yellow road, and then sort of down there. So good news for the Ukrainians there. Deep State Illuminate. So this is, I think, a Russian source saying the enemy is conducting a counteroffensive. The enemy here being Ukraine. Near Prokrosk, the Brave defeated the assault battalion Skala. So Skala is a Ukrainian assault battalion. So these are Russians claiming that Skala have been defeated. They're all defeated. The enemy so the Ukrainians began a series of counterattacks breaking through the outskirts of the village of Shevchenko. Footage shows fighters from the center group conducting assault operations, clearing buildings in which Ukrainian armed forces soldiers have entrenched themselves, and interrogating captured enemy attack aircraft. I don't know what that means. Interrogating some aircraft. So that's a 5.5-minute video. I think that means as a translation, probably POWs. So maybe some captured Ukrainians there. But yeah, so they are suggesting that they've actually pushed the Ukrainians back or defeated the Ukrainians there. But there'll be various claims coming out from all of this area going forward. And then we have another source, a Ukrainian source here, saying on the left flank of the Prokrosk direction, the Ukrainian armed forces continue counterattacks near the area or in the area of Uspanivka, Udachnoye, so Udachne and Kotlina, Pischany and Shevchenko, all the places I just mentioned. According to enemy drone footage, the clashes have moved to the eastern part. So this is, moving down to this area. And then we have Raging 545, another source saying it's being reported that Ukrainian forces have retaken Udachne and have regained a number of positions south of the village. So again, like we talked about Kotlina there, but actually some area south of the railway line as well, and a bit sticking out there on top. So if we enlarge that, and a tree line there, but Udachne completely not under the control of the Russians. So that is to claim that no, they don't control any of this area. If you see that, that whole two-tone field there has been recaptured. So all of that area recaptured and not in control of that, and not in control of any of this area. Maybe a slight bit here that they control. That's that. That tiny bit of purple there. They might still have under their control, and that's what Andrew Perpetua has on his map. So, Surat Maps is admitting that Ukrainians have pushed back into Uspanivka, but otherwise no change. But I expect that to change tomorrow. Some of these are quite fresh sources coming in with this. And reports that the Ukrainians have liberated Uspanivka as we have accepted by Surat Maps there. And then just the last one here, just another one, an Uspanivka, pushing them even further back, grey zone, to the east of the village there. So, that's what we have at the moment. So that's good news for the Ukrainians there. And then when we come further to the south, we have some small gains for the Ukrainians, for the Russians around Ulakli. This is the, I don't know, the area you call it now. Kharkiv seems to be very much in the distance now. The Andrivka, let's call it the Andrivka sector, where the Russians are trying to close in that sector between Konstantinopol and Andrivka. And then further to the south, Andriy-Perpetua, sort of catching up a little bit with what Surat maps have previously claimed to have been under control of the Russians. That may or may not have happened in the last 24 hours, might have been previously. But actually, that's pretty good. No other significant changes to the Velika Novosilka area or indeed the Andriivka area. And then we just have a slight change around, where are we? Near Myrna, Shabaki, on the way to the reservoir, Nesaryanka. So yes, that's just a field also there, nothing too serious. So I'd say that's pretty good news for the Ukrainians. In fact, with Suryat maps today, we had more Ukrainian pins than Russian pins, and that is definitely a rarity. Not the same for Andriy-Perpetua, because I don't think he's logged any of those gains, because as I say, his mapping hasn't been updated for sort of 21 hours now. But yeah, that's the mapping update today. Much better news for the Ukrainians on that kind of micro scale. But when you go up to the macro scale, my goodness, it's all going crazy today with regard to halting of weapons. I was just reading about how the Doge in the American government have even, they're looking like they're closing down a munitions factory by sacking 1,000 people working in one of these munitions factories. It's just absolutely insane what's going on across the pond. But hopefully these guys can keep their heads cool, calm and collected, and get on with doing the work of defending their country and defending democracy on the front lines of the battlefields of Ukraine. Okay, take care. Speak soon.